Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Utah Stories Show. My name is Rich Markosian. On the program today, a very exciting guest. We have Craig Boren. He's the president of the Utah Falconers Association. And if you don't know what being a falconer is, it's the practice of training a falcon to go out, fly off, and hunt things for you, or go check out the scenery and come back. A lot of them can hold the falcon on their shoulder, and the falcon's very tame. And it's just, I've always wanted to talk to somebody like Craig, so this will be very exciting. So before we get to that, I want to tell you about Curry Pizza, who has been serving Indian food for over 10 years. Guy Fieri recently learned about Curry Pizza and featured them on his show, Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives. Check out the episode, but more importantly, check out Curry Pizza. It's truly awesome. The program is also brought to you by Utah State, home of the Aggies. Living on campus means more sleep, more friends, and better grades. While others are driving or walking to campus, you're getting those precious extra minutes of sleep. Instead of going home to your mom or your cat, you're hanging out with roommates, neighbors, and friends. On-campus housing is a community of academic support, peers, mentors, friends, and constant activities. For a virtual tour, room details, theme options, and to apply, visit usu.edu/housing. All right, Craig, thanks for being on the program.
Glad to be here.
So tell me, how did you get into falconeering?
Man, my story is kind of similar to others. Other people will tell you they've read a book, probably something along the lines of My Side of the Mountain, and kind of inspired them. To be honest with you, I don't really remember what struck my interest, but it was something that I spoke with my wife about often since we got married. And after settling down for a number of years, and we had a few kids, and I had a friend that put something up on Facebook, and it had a picture of a red-tailed hawk, and it says, "Hey, say goodbye to Squeaker. It's off to a breeding program." And that right there sparked the fire to consult with my wife and say, "Listen, we're in a good spot. Can we try this out?" And she says, "Yeah, why not?" And so we started making contacts and haven't looked back since.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you went and bought a bird?
As you start out, you can buy a bird, but the best way to do it, you're going to learn a whole lot more if you go ahead and trap a wild bird.
Oh, okay. And so that's what you did?
So that's what I did. We went... So there's about 5 steps to the process to become a falconer. Step number 1, there is a state and a federal exam you got to pass, and it covers just basic falconry, laws and regulations, training, identification, health and maintenance, kind of things of that nature. So you pass the exam, and then it doesn't really matter which order the next ones happen in. But they all need to happen at some point. But the next one is going to be find a mentor or a sponsor. And then you're going to have to build a facilities, an enclosure. And then the state has to come out and certify that that enclosure is safe. And then you go to your local Division of Wildlife office and pay the fees. And bada bing, bada boom. You're off and running.
Yeah, and I called this episode the Beastmaster because... I think what has made me think that falconeering must be so awesome is when I'm out in nature with my dogs and we're running, I feel this connection with them. It's not like I'm controlling them, but we feel like a real cohesive unit, like we're a pack. And I can imagine that when you take your bird out into nature and you're, exploring this beautiful, massive area, and you just let that bird out, and then you see it fly off. Do you feel like this great connection with the bird and the environment through the bird?
We get to experience nature in ways that most people don't. Everybody can look at you and say, "Oh, nature is beautiful. Nature is amazing," but it is, right? But it's also violent. It's also gruesome. It's also... there's so many things that it can be called. It's nature. And that is one of the things that is so much fun about falconry, because at any moment, that bird can decide to take off.
Yeah.
and not come back, but they choose to be a part of our experience as well. And so that's what makes it fun for me is yeah, I totally feel some of that oneness with nature, that team effort in catching game.
Yeah, and the way I've heard it described is you kind of go to an area where you know there's probably some jackrabbits or hares or upland game, and you just take that bird and you just let it go, and it just comes back with food for you, right?
So a lot of that happens. Yes, we do a lot of scouting to figure out where game is at, and one of the things that is a little misconception with falconry is sometimes they don't bring the food back. A lot of times what we hunt is typically too heavy for them to fly with. So, for example, I'm hunting with harris hawks right now, and so when they go and tackle a jackrabbit, it's really hard for them to move it anywhere, let alone bring it back to us. So usually what happens, and this is also indicative with upland game as far as ducks and pheasant, is what they'll do is they'll usually pin it down to the ground. And then we are able to approach them and help them with their meal, and then clean up and head back home.
That's cool. So tell me, what do you get more of? You get more upland game or more rabbits, or what are you after?
So for me, I target a lot of jackrabbits. For me, there's a lot more value in that than there is some of the other quarry. Because right now I have two birds that I'm flying. They're two birds that hunt together, and one jackrabbit will feed those two birds for about 5 or 6 days. But if we catch a cottontail, that cottontail will only feed them for maybe 2 or 3 days, as opposed to even a duck. If they catch a duck, we're still looking at maybe 3 or 4 days worth of food.
Wow!
So I really like more bang for your buck. So we hunt a lot of the jackrabbits.
Sweet.
And a lot of that, too, depends on the kind of species of bird you're flying. So if you're flying what we call a longwing, a peregrine, or a prairie falcon, they're more prone to hunt birds. So like ducks and pheasants and sage grouse. But if you have a hawk, usually you're going to target more ground quarry, squirrels or cottontails or jackrabbits or whatever might be out there. So does that make sense?
Yeah, so okay. they have their personal preferences and what they're kind of built for.
Right.
And you just sort of target what they're naturally good at.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things we try to do as falconers is just enhance the natural ability of the bird.
Cool.
So
what's the process you go through when you're scouting? Do you kind of know where the game is beforehand, or does the hawk clue you in, or what do you go through to?
So usually if I'm scouting a new area, is that what you're talking about? Or,
yeah.
So when we go scouting in an area, a lot of times we don't even bring the bird with us. Some guys will bring a dog with them to either help flush whatever game is out there or point on some of the game that might be out there. If they're, if you're out looking for chuckers, it can be kind of a bugger to find if you're on your own. So you run the dog and let it do its thing, and then if it finds a bunch, then you may have found a good spot to come hunting.
What's a chucker?
A chucker is a small bird about a little bit bigger than a pigeon. They run usually in the foothills of Utah, in some of the foothills, and they beautiful little bird. They're mostly gray.
Oh, I've seen those. I kind of thought they were grouse, but they're chuckers.
Yes, they're kind of like grouse, but they're a little smaller.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So that's usually what happens when it comes to scouting. Like if we're scouting for rabbits, we'll pretty much just walk through a sagebrush field. And then if we end up kicking up a whole bunch of rabbits, this is a great spot. Let's bring the birds back. Another thing to look at is, terrain. Sometimes the terrain is not good for a hunt. Steep hills, or if it's near, some guys don't like to hunt near houses in the city limits, and other guys love it. There's inherent risk for each one. But that kind of is about what goes into scouting. I've been bold enough, I guess you could say, to scout with the birds, and it can go either way. I took a trip earlier this year down to southern Utah and tried an area that looked fantastic from Google Maps. But we walked around for an hour and a half and we didn't see a single rabbit in this sagebrush field. And then there was another place we tried and there were rabbits everywhere. So when you're doing something like that, it's kind of a coin toss. You never really know what you're going to get.
Yeah, I've been out to Dell a few times, and sometimes there's lots of rabbits and sometimes there's not.
Yeah.
Do you have specific places you'd mention where you can find a lot of rabbits, a lot of jackrabbits?
Absolutely. Every falconer's got a honey hole they usually don't like to talk about or they don't like to take other people to.
Yeah.
But the best areas that I found are honestly where people are riding a lot of four-wheelers.
Oh, really?
So, I mean, we have a lot of guys that hunt out at 5 Mile Pass, down just west of Cedar Fort, west of Eagle Mountain. Other areas where that might be popular with four-wheelers. Because if you have a lot of people riding four-wheelers, you have a lot of people that understand we shouldn't shoot guns here.
Okay.
And so that allows populations to grow. And usually they're pretty good areas.
That makes a lot of sense. So
Yeah.
you actually exploit the whole advantage you have by using a bird instead of a firearm.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
that makes a lot
to
of
whatever
sense.
advantage we can.
Yeah. Huh. So do you not go then where people are typically hunting with firearms?
There are some areas that I have been hunting, and it's so taboo because you never know. And I hate to paint any bad picture of any particular group, but you just never know what might happen. We've had guys that have lost birds that have been shot
Really?
when they've been out hunting, and so that's kind of we want to stay away from that, and we don't want to, we don't want anything to happen to the bird, and if something does happen, there's always legal obligations that need to happen there. So
Yeah.
that's not the idea, is to get people in trouble or to put ourselves and the birds in danger. So we do try to avoid some of those places.
And so you don't take a firearm with you?
I usually carry a small handgun.
Uh-huh.
A lot of that is because we do have coyotes.
Oh.
And because I hunt a lot of rabbits. I don't know if you're familiar with when a rabbit gets injured, but they scream. I call it a victory cry because that usually means the bird's caught it. But that also draws in other predators. We have, like I said, coyotes. I've had a couple of them. Only once, I shouldn't say it happens a lot, but only once I've had a coyote come in on us while we were dispatching the quarry. And it scared the snot out of me. I didn't expect to see that, and luckily I had one of the birds up there that was making an alarm call that kind of gave me a heads up to what was going on.
Get rough, and I would imagine sometimes it wouldn't be impossible for a coyote to pick a fight with your bird.
Absolutely. You never know what's going to happen when you're out in the field. I've heard stories from guys that have been doing this for 30, 40 years that I thought, no way. Are you serious? You saw that happen? And the longer that I'm in this sport, I'm starting to believe a lot of those stories because there's so much that happens in nature that we are really oblivious to until we spend a lot of time out there.
What are some of the more crazy stories you've heard?
Man, a lot of them, just being killed by eagles and then following, because as falconers, we have ways to track our birds. A lot of them is a little radio telemetry that's on the bird, so we can follow the radio signal. We had a gent here a couple of years ago that put his bird in the air, and he didn't know where it went. They tracked it for about 3 or 4 days up the mountain, then down the mountain, then up the mountain, and then down the mountain. And finally had a fellow falconer go up and really spent some serious time that was really good at tracking. And they found we call it a transmitter, the locator that was on the bird. It had actually been inside of an eagle for 3 days while it was flying up and down the mountain. And then it, like owls have little pellets, so do most raptors, but it kind of threw up the pellet with the feathers and all of the other gear, and there it was. It was still tracking. So,
Wow.
I mean, you wouldn't think something like that would happen, but
I
right
didn't
there, you know.
raptors killed other raptors, but I
Yeah.
guess that makes sense.
Yeah, we've had a lot of guys lose their birds to golden eagles.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they are an apex predator.
Uh-huh.
Absolutely.
Man, that's amazing.
It is.
So when you go out, do you usually go out by yourself with the bird, or you go with another person who's got a bird, or what's your setup usually like?
You know, for me, I'm a little bit more social than most.
Mm-hmm.
I don't mind when people come with me. The birds are used to people, and so some birds are real skittish around crowds or around new faces. So you've got to make sure you take that into consideration. But the ones that I have right now are really comfortable with the group. So most of the time, there's usually somebody with me. A lot of times it's somebody that's looking into falconry, wants to know more, to find out if it is something that they would like to get into.
Mm-hmm.
But I really do love it when I'm able to get out by myself.
I bet. Yeah.
There's just something about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you and the bird, and I imagine it's a little bit like what, how, and why I have to get out with my dogs by myself with them on a weekly basis, or I just don't feel like I'm balanced. It's like
Absolutely.
you're tapping into something much bigger and more powerful than you by making that connection with nature, and I used to watch that show, The Beastmaster. You ever seen that?
I've seen clips. Yeah.
And he has this bird, and he's actually able to see through the eyes of his bird.
Uh-huh.
And he's able to see like where he's going, what he's gonna run
Get himself
into, where the
yeah.
enemy is. And I know you don't put a camera on your bird, but you feel like there's any way you and the bird communicate when the bird sees prey, or you feel like it's getting close to prey?
You can tell a lot by how the bird's flying. Once you see them fly enough, there's subtle things you start to notice. When I first started out in the sport, every chase looked the same. But as I have gotten better, and as I've learned more, and as I have learned more of the body language, I can tell more of what's going on. So for example, when I put the birds up and we are walking through the sagebrush, a lot of times I don't even know what they're chasing, whether it's a jackrabbit or a cottontail or maybe something else that's wandered up out there. But a lot of times you can tell by their body language in the air.
No kidding.
You can almost tell when I tell this when I'm out hunting is they're chasing a jackrabbit, they're going. But when they see a cottontail, they get out of the Geo Metro and into the Ferrari. They turn it on, and they there's just something about it. They get a lot more excited about the smaller quarry, something they really can manhandle better. So,
and their method is they just swoop down with their talons and grab it and throw it, or how do they make the kill, or how do they stop it?
Good question. Again, it's kind of species specific. We take a peregrine falcon is not going to hunt the same as, for example, what I'm hunting with is Harris hawks at the moment. A peregrine is going to kind of fly above you, anywhere from 400 to 1,200 feet above you, and just kind of circle. And then when you flush game, it's gonna chase that and kind of herd that quarry to a good spot, and then it's gonna dive down on it. And most of the time, it's gonna dive on it while it's in the air. Some great videos out on YouTube that you can see the bird come down and the poof of feathers when they hit, and then they'll knock it to the ground, and then once they get on top of it, the falcons have a little tooth in their beak. A lot of times they'll go down and crack the neck with that tooth.
Wow.
The hawks, on the other hand, are a little lazier. You'll see most of them perched up on like a telephone pole. How I do it, I have a little perch that I hold in my hands that goes up about 6 or 8 feet with a T on top of it. So they perch up above me, and then when they see something, they just launch off of that.
Wow.
And what they do is we call it crash in the brush, where they just crash right into the brush.
Wow.
So I hope that kind of
Yeah.
makes sense. And they'll usually pin it down rather than when the falcons kind of knock it down from the air.
So the falcons use their beak, and they generally go after that vertebrae and break the vertebrae. And
After they knock
cord.
it, usually they'll either knock it out, or because what they'll do is they'll fly down, and then they'll some of them come up underneath and kind of scratch at the head, or somehow knock the bird down. Others will hit it on the way down, which has a lot more power, and they'll rake their talons across the body of the pheasant or the sage grouse or the duck, whatever it is, and then that will usually send the bird head over heels to the ground, and then they'll get on the ground and dispatch it.
Nice.
So
we got to show some of that footage, Tyler.
There's some good stuff out there.
We'll find some and play some on the video while you're talking about it.
Yeah.
So do you ever eat any of the game that they get, or is it usually just for them?
So I'm not very brave when it comes to cuisine. I'm a meat and potatoes kind of guy.
Yeah.
There are some falconers who honor the game, and they'll have 3 or 4 meals from what their birds have caught.
You have a writer who loves jackrabbit.
Yeah, exactly.
Our writer Dan Potts, who writes for Utah Stories regularly. He goes out to the West Desert and just gets a bunch of them, and he loves eating them.
Right.
He knows how to make them really good.
And I've had neighbors tell me that cottontail, it tastes great, but I've never had it.
Yeah.
I have yet to eat anything the birds have caught.
Okay.
But there's enough people out there that do it all the time.
Yeah, I gotta say, I've only hunted and killed one animal.
Mm-hmm.
Not to say that I don't want to do more hunting, but I got a jackrabbit and I skinned it and I got the meat off it.
Yeah.
And I just didn't want to eat it. I wasn't like, oh, I want to eat that now. I wanted to give it to my dogs, which I did.
Right.
But I think it takes another step where you're like, okay, that beautiful animal, I now want to eat it.
Right.
It's just like not quite the step I'm ready to take yet.
I can totally appreciate that. I remember feeling the same way when I first shot a mule deer after taking care of it and butchering it, and then all of a sudden, there it is, packaged meat. Yeah.
Yeah, it's weird. I had the same problem with my chickens. Like, it's hard for me to eat my backyard chickens.
Yeah.
And my golden retriever, unfortunately, killed a bunch of them.
Yeah.
But I just can't see them as food and pets at the same time. There's this disconnect.
Yeah, I can totally appreciate that. But most of us do. Whatever the birds catch, we bring it home. A lot of times because we don't do a lot of hunting in the summertime. Because the birds are molting, so they're growing new feathers. A lot of times they're changing. The birds have some nesting tendencies, so it gets really kind of risky to start flying in the summertime because they often won't come back. And so in order to have them grow their feathers properly, we just don't do a lot of flying in the summer. So we'll stockpile their food to get us through those times when we're not hunting.
Okay.
And then most of the time, at least in my experience, and this isn't everybody's, but most of the time we're able to go through the summer without having to supplement food another way. So
that's cool.
Yeah.
So this is your best time to be hunting in the winter?
This is the best time to be hunting. Our falconry season is usually a fall, winter, spring sport from about September till about late February. Most people will hang up their hats somewhere in March, put the birds up for molt.
Cool.
So
that's neat. That probably makes the winter a lot more fun.
Oh man, everybody says, "Oh, I hate the storms, I hate the snow," but I love it.
Yeah,
because those rabbits stick out like a sore thumb, and it's fun to get out there. I don't know if you've been able to ever read what happens in the dirt, or but I love what the stories the snow tells. Because the birds don't catch everything every chance. So it's kind of fun to watch where this is where the rabbit turned and this is where the bird hit. And you can see a lot of that in the snow. Or this is where they grabbed the rabbit because there's a little fur on the ground, but it got away. And you can read how kind of that story played out in the snow. So that to me, I really like reading some of those stories.
Yeah, that's super cool. I did go elk hunting with my friend just a couple months ago. And we were with a guy who's been hunting for 40 years. My friend is pretty new to it,
Right.
3 or 4 years. But that guy could easily tell from the consistency of the pellets how long ago he had been there, and,
Yeah.
and by just looking at the tracks in the snow,
Right.
how fresh they were. And he could tell that there was a herd of elk. We were in near Capitol Reef National Park. He could tell there was a herd of elk there, and that they had moved on, and that we had missed them by more than 2-3 hours.
Oh man,
So it was like they were all there, but we missed the
Just
party,
missed
and so we just went down and down and kept trying to look for him. But he knew they were all the way down at the base of the valley,
Right.
and so we'd have to go back a different direction in order to get to him. But
Right.
but there's so much you can tell from the tracks,
Exactly.
if you know what to look for.
Right.
And it's this whole other sort of language that I think we kind of tap into from our ancestral past, where obviously that was a big part of how you feed yourself.
Exactly.
When
Yeah.
we were hunter gatherers. And is that another aspect to it that you feel like you tap into? Is just sort of the way people were hunting hundreds of years ago?
A little bit. Yeah, there's been a couple comments made. Oh, so if the world went to crap, you could feed your family with this. Well, we could supplement, right?
We could slowly starve less fast than
right.
you.
Yeah. So tapping into some of those heritage. I mean,
Because where did it come from? Was
to
it
be
the
hon-
Native Americans?
To be honest with you, falconry has been around for nearly 4,000 years.
Wow.
We have records. There have been falcons that were mummified with their kings and priests and queens. And it dates way back. It's really, really big out in the Middle East, in Iraq and Iran and I can't even say the word Dubai, out in Dubai.
Like
Yeah.
I've heard of Dubai. So especially back in the Middle East, they're still into it.
Absolutely. I work with a guy that's an immigrant from Iraq, and he says, "Yeah, but only the rich people do it out there.
Oh, really?
Only the rich people do it." And I says, "Oh, okay. Well, it's not that way here. So if you want to learn."
That's cool.
So, but yeah, it's something that's been around for a really long time. Go back into the Middle Ages, and they had rules. If you were a king, you had to fly a certain bird. If you were a queen, you could only fly, a little kestrel or a merlin. Or, if you were a prince, you had to have a Cooper's hawk or whatever it was. But you were kind of dictated by your status as to what bird you could fly.
And if you were a peasant and you had the same type of bird as the king,
There were penalties. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
And there was somebody was saying something about stealing a bird off the king's land would result in the bird getting a meal off of maybe your thigh or some. I can't verify that, but there are some stories about an ounce of flesh was a penalty for this or for that.
Wow. So do you know if Native Americans were doing falconry too?
That is a really good question.
I know they incorporated a lot of feathers into their headdresses and things like that.
My understanding, and I'm not sure if it's correct, but my understanding is that they hold the birds very sacred, and they didn't really practice falconry because of that. Because they thought the freedom and the just the whole sacredness of the birds themselves that they didn't feel worthy, I guess, might be a good way to put it. That's my understanding.
Yeah. I could see how that makes sense.
Yeah. So I've been wrong on a lot of things before. So
Well, we'll look into it. And so what's your day job, Craig?
oh man, we went there. No, I am. I'm actually a mail carrier
Cool.
for Lehigh City. So
Yeah. Yeah, I guess you can't use the Falcons to deliver the mail, huh?
well, not quite. We're getting there.
That's cool. Well, I think that's about it. So the places that you go to, I mean, a lot of what we cover here at Utah Stories, and we have guests on about, is land use and land preservation of the wilderness.
Yeah.
Are you seeing more and more encroachment from human activity on the lands you're wanting to do falconry, or how's that part of what you do been?
You know, we are really lucky here in Utah to have a lot of open land to be able to hunt on. Yes, we do see a lot of encroachment. We do see a lot of habitat being destroyed for new developments. In fact, if you want, there's a gentleman by the name of Sean Reed out in Eagle Mountain that has got a fantastic project out there. It's called the Eagle Mountain Kestrel Project, where he has got and built kestrel nest boxes. Because a lot of their habitat has been taken away, and we've actually seen a decline in the American kestrel because, you know, those open fields where they hunt aren't open anymore.
And that used to be where they would be and breed. And
yeah, and so it's really a lot of fun to see the Eagle Mountain City itself, even some of the elected officials come out and designate some of the land out there to keep it open. So these guys can have a place to again, stay around, right?
That's very cool.
It's something that the Utah Falconers Association has also helped in. We have had, I think, 10 different kestrel box projects done this year. We've placed nearly over, I think it was 105 kestrel nest boxes this year, just throughout the state, because we want to help where we can. To see these guys come back. It's a bird we often use in falconry, and to see them decline because of habitat it's sad. It's sad to watch.
What do kestrels look like? You could probably pull one up.
Kestrels, the males look a lot more colorful, a lot prettier than the females are. The females are gray. They're not a big bird. They're about the size, I want to say a little bit bigger than a robin.
Okay.
And their primary food source is mice, sparrows, and starlings.
Okay.
And so they hunt those open fields where a lot of mice and voles are at. And when we start building the houses, a lot of that goes away.
Yeah, one guest we had on the podcast was talking about the repercussions of the inland port. I don't know if you've heard about that.
I've heard a little bit.
Yeah, they're opening up 16,000 acres of land that's wetlands near the Great Salt Lake.
Yeah.
And they want to turn it into a big shipping and receiving center to take international freight and go through customs and all that.
Yeah.
And the problem is they need to use tons and tons and tons of insecticide because it's the biggest mosquito habitat west of the Mississippi. And nobody thinks like mosquitoes or anything but just pest, lousy to be around. But the problem is starlings feed on mosquitoes.
Right.
Bats feed on mosquitoes. All these mosquito larvae, I should say.
Right.
And all of these like really low on the food pyramid birds feed on that. And my guess is falcons and, you know, like you said, kestrels, they feed on these smaller birds. And if those birds can't get mosquitoes, then I'm sure it's going to trickle up.
It works its way up the food chain pretty quick. I mean, you probably heard about the DDT back in the 70s, or was it the 60s, where the farmers were using a lot of DDT to get the gophers and the mice and the voles out of their fields, which worked great. But we also had, you know, foxes, eagles, hawks, falcons eating these infected birds. And I mean, they didn't die from the poison, but what happened was the shell on their eggs got soft. And so when they would go sit down to incubate them, they would actually crush the eggs, which led to the bald eagle being on the extinction list, or not extinct, but
endangered
species list. Thank you. And also the peregrine falcon was the same thing. And so being placed on that is all because of, some of these things we just overlook. And to have that happen in today's world, man, we're smarter than that.
Yeah. Yeah, we got to be smarter
We've
than that.
got to be smarter than that. I mean, it takes so much more effort to recover than it does to just maintain and get better. So
Yeah. And that's my point with it. It's like we covered that story for about a month on the inland port. And yeah, it's going to bring jobs and it's going to definitely bring benefits and commerce to Utah. But if it's at the expense of our wetlands and our waterfowl and our, Salt Lake golden eagle population and falcons and all these amazing birds we have here, is it really worth it?
Is it worth it?
I mean, we have tons of tech jobs already. Do we really need more like shipping and receiving jobs going on down there?
Yeah.
And so it's one of those sort of hot button issues we've chimed in on, and
yeah,
and
absolutely.
I think we gotta put the environment on a higher pedestal.
Absolutely. I agree. It's like I said, we invest so much more playing catch up. And we know the impact.
Yeah.
I
And
mean,
you don't get back that land once you screw it up.
No.
If you just decimate, say, 16,000 acres of wetland like they want to do, that's not going to just come back if we decide, oh, whoops, we screwed up.
Exactly. A lot of these birds, they adapt. I mean, if there's a lot of ducks and swans and pelicans that are going out there, they're going to adapt. They're going to find somewhere else to go. So, if we all of a sudden say, oops, oh, sorry, we screwed that up, but it's going to take a long time for them to learn this is another safe place they can start using again.
Yeah. Or their population just continues to get decimated.
Exactly, right? And we're better than that.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that's part of your guys' mission. We'll have to put that in the links. Tyler, the Kestrel project is the Sean Reed. Is it S-H-A-U-N?
S-H-O-N-REED.
S-H-O-N-R-E-E-D.
He's with a group called Hawkwatch International.
Oh, I've seen them. They have their headquarters in Sugar House, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Cool.
Yep. Great
right.
conservation group.
Yeah, maybe we'll have them on the show. All right. Well, cool. Thanks a lot, Craig, for coming on the program.
Happy
Really
to be
appreciate
here.
it.
Yeah.
All right. And if you like this program, I can recommend to you Legends Pub and Grill. It's locally owned. It serves fresh, wholesome, delicious ingredients. Legends features steaks, burgers, sandwiches, salads, pizzas, and calzones. Plus, they now offer gluten-free and vegetarian options. Legends features over 30 craft and local beers, and they accommodate all ages. They have 2 locations to serve you. Downtown at 677 South, 200 West, and Southtown at 10631 South, Holiday Park Drive. All right, if you want to be informed about all of our great content we're covering this year at Utah Stories, you can watch a video I just made about our editorial mission. We have a lot of stuff we want to accomplish in 2020, and mostly it has to do with covering the major issues that affect the quality of life in Utah. But we also want to have on awesome guests like Craig and more people who are more engaged with the environment so that we can best understand how we preserve the environment, which I believe is our greatest asset here in Utah, with the ongoing population boom we're experiencing. And in the magazine this month, we write about 5 of the best hiking trails you can go on with your dog. I highly suggest you pick that up. It's available at all the best local restaurants, coffee shops, boutiques, libraries, and rec centers all across the state of Utah. You'll find Utah Stories. If you cannot find it, then go ahead and email me, Richard at Utah Stories, and we could get you hooked up with either a subscription or I can tell you where you can find it. And so with that, production assistance is provided by Tyler Bond, and production coordinator is Connie Lewis. Thanks for watching. Until next time, this is Rich Markosian signing out. The Utah Story Show is also brought to you by Paisley's Grass-Fed Beef. Premium, all-natural grass-fed beef delivered fresh to your door, free anywhere in the state of Utah. Order yours today at paisleys.com. That's Paizlees.com. Paisley's Grass-Fed Beef, always the right choice.